Welcome back. This is Nancy Siegel, Solutions for the Workplace. With me is Ellen Steverson, Starting Block Career Services. This is our podcast, Bite-Sized Career Strategies. This series of podcasts are focused on Zippia.com's research into what people in individual states were Googling that was career related. And it's been a pretty wild ride, I think. On this podcast, we're going to focus on things at work that can lead you to be fired. In Illinois, the most Googled thing was drinking at work. In Pennsylvania, it was sleeping at work. In Florida, it was drug testing. And Connecticut actually wants to know how to get fired. So we're going to talk about these kinds of things. And can you get fired for doing stupid stuff at work? Of course, the short answer is yes. Ellen?
Absolutely, Nancy. Welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. This is a great topic. When you see people actually Googling drinking at work, my mind immediately went to restaurants. And, I've been in restaurants where I see the bartender drinking liquor. And again, is that appropriate? I don't know. Because you know what? I don't know the company policy. Okay. So again, first, I would say with all of these things, you need to know your company policy. But a lot of these things, drinking at work, sleeping at work, really have more to do with security, safety, things like that. So yes, if you're increasing the risk of dangerous things because you're sleeping on the job, I think the employer does have the right to fire you. Now, does that mean he has the right to fire you the first time? Because look, we've all had a bad night, right, Nancy? So what do you see on the federal side as far as if somebody does something inappropriately at work?
Okay. So I think that's a great question. So on the federal side of things, and really a lot of the private sector as well, the federal government believes in what's called progressive discipline. So what does progressive discipline actually mean? It means looking at what was done and the severity of it. So in some cases, if somebody uses a swear word, for example, in a work setting, that's not likely, depending on the circumstances, to result in a removal. But fighting, drinking on federal property, which is against the law, violating a security clearance, those kinds of things could, depending again on the circumstances, result in an immediate removal. It also depends on the federal side of things, what kind of employee you actually are. Are you a probationary employee? Are you a long-term employee? What is the level of your security clearance? But if these kinds of misbehaviors are in fact noted, you can and should expect the supervisor or others to conduct an investigation or fact finding. You should expect to be at a minimum counseled, and it is not unlikely that you would receive paperwork that either is a warning or a proposal to remove you. How does it work on the private sector side?
Yeah, so Nancy, you hit the nail on the head with all that type of stuff with the federal government, which is one of the reasons why I love to listen about federal jobs, because it's so great to hear that our government has these things in place. Now, in the private sector, again, it depends, because if you work for a larger organization, typically larger organizations, as they grow, they start putting policies and procedures and HR things into practice. So then you do have, somebody that's going to counsel you. They're going to write it up. It's going to be in your file, things like that. If you work for a very small company, 20, 25, 30 people under 50, they might not have a process. And if you really do something that they feel has threatened the company, or they told you not to do it, they could turn around and just fire you. And I definitely have had a multitude of clients over the 10 years I've been doing this come to me and say, I walked into work and I got fired. And your little comment a little while ago it just brought me right back to this one client. She went to an after-hour event, but it is a work event, and she wasn't drinking heavily. She had one drink because they were expected to socialize. It's with customers. However, she let her guard down and started cursing a little bit. In her mind, a little bit. I didn't get into the details. It doesn't really matter. But in the end, the next day, she was brought in, put on probation, and eventually let go. So again, even if it's after hours and you're at a work event, work is work, and be mindful of what you're doing. And when you're customer facing, like Nancy said, it depends on your job sometimes. I used to work at a place with a huge warehouse, and I'd go back there and I would hear some of my guys, girls or men, women or men, I'd hear them talking and laughing and saying swear words, but they're in the warehouse. No, nothing offensive. I didn't care. But then if I'm at a restaurant with me as the company image, working with clients in the room, swearing probably is not appropriate, even if the customer's doing it, which was her defense. When the customers were swearing, not appropriate to mimic.
So let me talk about something that you said. In a warehouse environment, you thought that the standards were different. On the federal side of things, and really, I think in all workplaces, the line has moved, right? Mm-hmm. I think behaviors that would have been accepted or laughed off 20 or 30 years ago are no longer acceptable, at least on my side, because from a risk standpoint, and if you look at the laws around harassment as an example, even if the 2 people or 3 people involved are okay with the behavior, if an observer or an outsider sees that behavior, that is still a potential harassment claim. And so I really do think the line here has changed regardless of your environment.
And from a private sector, I would explain that things have changed. And since I work with business owners and coach them and things like that, they can't find employees unless they have slacked on some of their things. I worked for a grocery chain doing training for them. And I came in one day, noticed everyone was in jeans basically. And I said, what happened to the khaki pants and the white shirt everyone's supposed to be wearing? And they said, we started getting so many people saying they can't come to work because they don't have clean clothes or won't wear that pants. We had to change. So although I agree with you that this standard should be higher, there are companies that now have to come and change. If you are hiring laborers, I have a person who owns a staffing agency. They do not get fired for cursing. That doesn't mean that they don't coach them not to use certain words. They coach them obviously not to harass. I don't necessarily always put the word cursing and harassing together.
I agree with you. And on that standard, drinking, flunking a drug test, sleeping, those kinds of issues are likely to result in discipline. And employers do, in fact, have the right, and I would argue the responsibility, to monitor the behavior of their employees. Now, should they be spying on employees? That's not what I'm talking about.
No, we're not. We're talking about obvious. If they're telling you we're going to give you a drug test, you are well aware of that. And if you flunk that drug test, they have every right not to hire you, not to bring you back. So again, we're not talking about anything sneaky or anything bad from an employer side, but you do have to realize that you're at work and you need to be helping the company grow, not helping the company be put at risk. So all of those things were great points.
That's right. And those things, if you engage in those kinds of behaviors, they're going to follow you. And getting fired for misconduct will impact your ability to get unemployment insurance. Every state has different rules for unemployment, but getting fired for cause is almost universal that it will impact your ability to get unemployment insurance. And from a workers' comp standpoint, if you suffer a workplace injury because you're horsing around or violating safety rules or any of that kind of thing, that too could have an impact.
And if you're really unhappy at work and doing things like falling asleep at work and things like that, you need to really make sure you're planning and thinking ahead about leaving your job. And I think that's a great way to end this segment here. Again, employers have every right to let people go. Be mindful of this as you're moving forward on your career, even if it's a private sector or the federal sector.
Absolutely. And this is Nancy Siegel, Solutions for the Workplace. And we have Ellen Steverson, Starting Block Career Services. So Illinois, Pennsylvania, Florida, and Connecticut, get your acts together. Don't set yourself up to get fired.
Absolutely. Have a great day.
Thank you. If you enjoyed this podcast, please visit Nancy or Ellen's website for additional information about our services, a free tip sheet which highlights our discussion today, and be sure to tune in to our next podcast, which will be posted soon. Thank you.